At the outset, let me thank Professor Matthew Joseph who has joined us. He'll be speaking on Eurocentrism and international relations. Now, bit of introduction about him. He happens to be my teacher, my supervisor there in MMAJ Academy of International Studies. He's professor there. Uh, he earned his PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru University under Professor Sukhdev Muni with a specialization in ethnic conflict in Bhutan. His academic interests span South Asian studies, post-colonialism, civil society, Pakistan studies, and of course, international relations. His research focuses on state, civil society, ethnic conflict, and political transition in South Asia, particularly, as I said, Pakistan and Bhutan. And he has authored and edited several books, including Understanding Pakistan and the Muslim World, um, and published widely in reputed journals.
modern Europe with Greco-Roman civilization is again a story. It is something which is beyond our imagination. The Renaissance, Enlightenment, and the end of history narrative, which emphasizes the ultimate triumph of West or Euro-American world, are inalienable to the idea of Eurocentrism. You see all the narratives, whether it is end of history or clash of civilization, everything ends up in the automatic victory of the West, whether we like it or not. Even though we are opposing, many people are opposing the clash of civilization, but the narrative, when we engage that, we are also engaging with that narrative and thereby imbibing the logic of it. The projected connection between the Greco-Roman civilization and medieval and modern Europe is also imaginary and ideological. Frankly speaking, one cannot find any meaningful connection between the Greek tradition and Northern Europe. Basically, if you look at the spatial, distance between these areas, Greco-Roman civilization was in Southern Europe, uh, and its connection with Northern Europe is absolutely not there. But whenever we think about Europe, we think about both Southern Europe as well as Western Europe connected, and it is all linked to the great so-called Greco-Roman civilization. The establishment of Greenwich Mean Time as the global standard time and the adoption of Gregorian calendar are examples of how Eurocentrism shapes our perception of time and periodization of history. Uh, we have Indian Standard Time. Pakistan has Pakistan Standard Time. Even small countries like Bhutan have their own Standard Time. But these are all in reference to GMT, Greenwich Mean Time. So a particular observatory in England is deciding the time schedule of all other places. How it happened? It happened in the last 500 years only. And again, calendar. There are many calendars existing, Islamic calendar, for example. Every place has got its own calendar. African regions, they have their own calendar. Many parts of India has their own calendar. India has a different calendar, Saga year and all that. But these calendars are there. They are calendars, ethno-specific calendars. But calendar is Gregorian calendar. So we calculate everything according to that. This has also happened in the last 500 years. It has not more than that much of history. The periodization of history, like ancient history, medieval history, and modern history. This is also so specific to Europe, which has been transplanted to all over. You just take the case of India, major universities, Aligarh University, Jawaharlal Nehru University, Jamia. You have ancient, medieval, and modern. Whether this particular periodization is applicable to us or not, how do you distinguish between ancient and medieval? How do you distinguish between medieval and modern? And in order to escape this problem, now people are talking about early modern, late medieval. So how do this is basically, and you're not getting out of that. You're basically again falling into the same trap, ancient, medieval, modern. The classification of the world into West and East and North and South also happened due to Eurocentric notion about the centrality of Western Europe. North Europe, West Europe, East Europe, West, West and the rest, West and East, North and South, with the debate, global North and global South, these are all actually linked to the position of Europe. Whenever we discuss about it, see everywhere, whether it is in history, in international politics, everything is basically revolving around Europe. They have created a manner in which, we cannot escape. Uh, Everything is like that. The terms Near East and Far East are also coined to gauge the distance between these areas from the center of the universe, Western Europe. The center of Europe is always Western Europe. So, Near East means which are the Near Eastern regions. Basically, that Soviet, southern part of Soviet Union, that area was Near East. Then Far East. I still remember my brother was a student of history. He was a student of Tirupati Venkateswara University. He had a paper, History of the Far East. So it is basically Japan, Korea, and all that. So why Far East? Because it is far east from London. That is the reason. So everything is calculated from that point of view. The invention of certain regions by Christopher Columbus. This is again an interesting fact. The invention of certain regions by Christopher Columbus is still celebrated. By celebrating these inventions by Columbus, the distinct histories and people of those regions are erased or obliterated. For example, it's a simple question: who invented United America? Amerigo Vespucci. Who invented the West Indies? Columbus. This is a fifth standard, sixth standard question. So everybody will answer like that. Before that, nobody existed. Like, they are there to just to, Columbus to go there and just invent that place. So by saying this or by answering this question, you are trying to erase the history of the people who lived there. Inca, Maya, Aztec, those civilizations are not there. When we write this, Columbus, the answer Columbus, then automatically it is very clear these civilizations never existed. The narratives about Europe only talks about the greatness of her in terms of culture, art, science, and philosophy. They do not see the darker side like racism, extermination of native peoples, of the colonies, and slave trade. See, for example, when we talk about Renaissance, Enlightenment, and all that, great philosophers, great philosophies, great ideas of liberation and things like that. Even when we talk about Kant talked about human agency and things like that. But this were happening while all other things were happening. In the sense that extermination of native people in Asia, Africa, and the New World, racism and massive population transfer in terms of slave trade. Whenever we study about the history of Europe, though it is connected to Europe, Europe's wealth accrued through all these processes, but we don't discuss these things. That is the beauty of the history which we generally study. Eurocentrism assumes that the values of Europe has universal application. Colonialism and modernity ensured the universalization of European values all over the world. European values are always universal. European history is universal. That is why we have to say that no, there is something called Asiatic mode of production. Even Marx is, a person who has seen the problems within European tradition, European history, and all that. But to explain, he was not able to explain the developments in India or China on the basis of what he has studied or what he had inherited. So he had to say that no, the normal yardstick which we use to explain European history is not applicable to India or China or Asian. So that is why this is the new thing called Asiatic mode of production. The rise of capitalism in the West is attributed to certain inherent qualities and values so specific to Europe. According to this argument, the European countries gradually overtaken India and China in all walks of life. Suddenly, one fine morning, Europe just started walking fast. This is what when we study the, history of civilization, we get that feeling. So one fine morning, Europe moved ahead with Renaissance, Enlightenment, and all that, and we became far behind. That is how. But this is very a historical kind of explanation and understanding, and absolutely erroneous also. Eurocentrism conveniently avoids the fact that the contributions of other cultures in the growth of West. The notion of Europe being a standalone wonder is absolutely historical and erroneous. We get a feeling generally while study world history that no Europe marched ahead and other civilizations were not able to do that. So it is a standalone case. But how can a standalone case happen just like that? That is very ahistorical. Though we study history, in the name of history, we study such a historical thing, such an erroneous thing. The Eurocentric understanding of the East or Orient constituted the body of knowledge called Orientalism. So, for many years, Orientalist scholars got maximum amount of prestige and support from the state because that was a very important profession for many people. Under the imperial expansion, Orientalism and scholarship on Orient was a respectable academic profession. So you would see in the late 18th century and 19th century, many of the Europeans who came here, especially in India as colonial administrators, they went back went back to academic institutions as Oriental scholars, and they got maximum. William Jones is a classic example. So they got much state support. They were accepted as great intellectuals and things like that. The publication of the book Orientalism by Said in 1978 made the term Orientalism with negative meaning. Till then, Orientalism was a very respectable position, a respectable profession also. But this book, which was released in 1978, actually changed everything. After that, Orientalism, Oriental scholarship, people who actually got degrees in Oriental, from Oriental institutes and things like that, they were not able to say that we are from Oriental Institute because it has got such a negative connotation because of, says very strong criticism towards that. According to Said, Orientalism is the representation of Orient, actually misrepresentation of Orient in the European thought. Orient never got an opportunity to represent itself. On the contrary, Europeans basically understood the way they wanted to understand the situation and they projected it as the Orient. So we actually got an Orient in the books or in the historical texts or in other kinds of texts available in literary texts also, which is not at all representing ourselves. Something else they have written about us, but that has become an academic subject, academic profession, very respectable profession for quite some time. Through this representation, the Orient lost its political agency and the capacity to represent itself. Europe needed a passive Orient to define its virulence. In this process, the Orient became the other of the West. Frankly speaking, this misrepresentation created the so-called, strong Europe. Strong Europe needed a weak Orient. What do you call a male, macho Europe needed a feminine Orient. This is exactly what happened. Orient was the other way around, but Orient was represented in this fashion. So Orient was that kind of Orient, that projection of Orient was needed for the perpetuation of the idea of the virulence of Europe. Though the Oriental scholarship lost its glitter due to the scathing attack by the post-colonial thinkers, Eurocentrism still exists in almost all of academic disciplines, including the discipline of international relations, where its influence is very profound. You can see other subjects like history, anthropology, sociology, they have somehow encountered this problem to an extent. In India also, you can see in many departments, people are trying to question these notions, but not in international relations. International relations is still within the purview of that kind of knowledge. The discipline of IR is originated in Western European academic terrain after the First World War. You all know that. The first chair professorship of IR, the Woodrow Wilson Chair, was established in 1919 in University of Wales, England. Thereafter, many universities in Britain and the US established IR departments. In the case of India, the first academic institution of IR was started in 1955, Indian School of International Studies, which was affiliated to uh, University of Delhi. Later on, that became the basis of Jawaharlal Nehru University. School of International Studies of Jawaharlal Nehru University has actually grown out of uh, Indian School of International Studies. When we were students of SAS, I'm ashamed to say that, though I claim I'm a student of JNU, Ubedar sir knows much better. We never used to say we are from SAS because School of International Studies, because of its particular, that ideological baggage, never went along with the other schools of, JNU. Those days we were not knowing why some of my seniors, they don't say. When you move around people from social science and other disciplines, so don't say. Because we never used to get that kind of, value. So the reason is now, when I started studying it, then I realized that this is the reason. Why? Because this particular discipline has never been decolonized. So that is the reason why all other social science disciplines, whether it's sociology, political science, economics, and history to a great extent, and we had great scholars there in those departments. They were decolonized to an extent, and then they started questioning these European notions, Eurocentrism within their disciplines. But we were not able to do that. We were not even able to identify that. That was the problem. The academic discipline of IR was formulated in the high time of imperialism, and obviously, due to this, it was heavily influenced by Eurocentric notions. As everybody knows, the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648 seems to be the basic starting point of the discipline. Popular textbook of IR, like the one authored by Norman D. Palmer and Howard C. Perkins, titled International Relations, repeated these things very clearly. It underlined. So, as a student of international, I started my IR journey from Mahatma Gandhi University, Kerala. So, that is in 1986-87. That time, this is the text which was given to us. This text was written in somewhere in 1950s, but that was the textbook used for international relations. So this is absolutely a Eurocentric kind of a text. So you cannot imagine or think beyond what exactly these people have written in that. So that was the situation at that time. The Treaty of Westphalia was an outcome of a specific European war and political situation. It established the principle of sovereign equality between states. The importance of Westphalia was the establishment of the idea of sovereign equality of states. It also later paved the way for the principle of balance of power and diplomacy in resolving conflicts between states. So, balance of power as an operational principle, as well as diplomacy to resolve issues. These are the so two, three things. One, sovereign equality, balance of power, and diplomacy. The 19th century Europe experienced relative peace due to balance of power, concept of Europe and things like that. However, it collapsed in the 20th century and two world wars happened when balance of power, how fragile those kinds of ideas that collapsed. The principles of sovereign equality and balance of power, so particular to Europe, they were not applicable to the non-European world. If you take the examples of these two important things, one is the idea of sovereign equality and balance of power. Do you think it is applicable to the rest of the world? It may be true in 19th century Europe, but it cannot be mechanically imposed on other regions of the world. The principle of sovereignty cannot stand alone without the principle of state security. The principles of balance of power and diplomacy are devised in this context to ensure the security of the sovereign state. So, this continuum of balance of power, security, diplomacy, state sovereignty, these are all linked, but these are in the context of Europe only. It cannot be mechanically transferred to other regions of the world. IR scholars of almost all hues think that the international realm is lacking a central authority and therefore very anarchic. Both realism and liberalism accept this fact within quote, and devise different means to address it. So this is a cardinal principle of international studies. So international relations, whichever international relations scholar you belong to, whichever tradition, will say that no, the domestic politics is very ordered. It has got central authority. It has certain rules and things like that. In international politics, there is nothing. It is absolutely chaos. So that means anarchy prevails. No, interestingly, even political scientists who basically think positively about anarchy, whenever they discuss about international relations, they say that no, international system, international politics is very anarchic, and that is not good for world peace and order and things like that. Realism considered state a rational actor, always trying to increase power and its security. Liberalism believes in cooperation between states and cosmopolitanism to address the situation of anarchy. So both these two important theoretical positions, they approach the central question of anarchy two different ways. One is to assume maximum power and security, realism, and the other liberal school, they think that through a kind of cosmopolitanism and a kind of cooperation among countries, it can be resolved. So that international society debate and things like that, it's because of that. The very basis of the notion of sovereignty is absolutely Eurocentric. And in practice, sovereign equality between states is not existing. The state system itself is very hierarchical. So The first thing which we generally study about, in political science classes at the degree level and then PG level, we study that sovereignty is indivisible. This is the first principle of sovereignty. But indivisible sovereignty is possible or not? Even at the high time of the 17th or 18th centuries, where the whole idea of sovereignty was invented, sovereignty as indivisible category never existed. Sovereignty is always subject to some kind of control from somewhere. And you see, in the international system, the order is such that sovereignty of United States, technically speaking, as a principle of United Nations, also all sovereign states are equal. Can you equate United States with Bhutan? Both are sovereign states. Sovereign equality should prevail. In principle, that is there also. But you cannot, in real terms, there is no equality existing. So the whole idea on which our international order is actually created is again very Eurocentric, and which is not existing. That is why all this, the way whenever the United States want, it intervenes and changes regimes in different countries. This happens because of that. So this is very hierarchical in nature. And frankly speaking, though sovereign equality as a principle exists, in reality, the world order is very hierarchical, where countries are basically arranged vertically, not horizontally. In the words of Naveed Pormo Khatri, the idea of sovereignty and colonialism are linked. Without colonialism, sovereignty could not have been imagined. This linkage is never discussed about sovereignty in IR. Whenever we discuss about sovereignty, we discuss sovereignty as an absolute principle. It has nothing to do with colonialism. This is the general trend in discussions in international relations. The concept of security, which is another important aspect in IR, is also extremely Eurocentric in its detail. The development security linkage in IR presupposes that development in the developing world ensure security in the first world or Western world. Security of what happened, why the Afghanistan became a problem for United States, why Middle East is a problem for United States, why the so-called failed states is a problem for United States or Western Europe. This is the reason. If there is no development in these regions, people, there is a possibility that they may reach there as refugees or political prisoners, whatever. In whatever category they can reach, they can create more problems there. So it is important to have development in third world. Third world development will ensure some kind of security at the metropolis. That is the reason why. So all these things, these are all connected. These are all how much Eurocentric it is. Whenever all these international donor agencies, IBRD or IMF, when they promote this idea of development, the basic point is this, that they don't want people there. The people here should be somehow managed so that they should not create any problem in the metropolis. The ontological foundations of IR, like the concepts of sovereignty and security, are Eurocentric, and they need to be interrogated. The epistemological claim of IR as an objective and value-free knowledge is also now identified as an Eurocentric notion. The discipline of IR is revolving around the primacy and supremacy of Europe over the rest of the world. The epistemological foundation of IR, that it is a very objective science. It's a value-free. There is nothing called a value-free social science or science per se. It is, everything is value loaded. So in that sense, it is also a value loaded thing. It cannot claim that it is a value free kind of a social science or humanity division. It is actually the discipline itself. It is not true with other disciplines, because of the internal criticism developed over a period of time. Other social sciences have changed a lot, but IR is still revolving around Europe. Whichever IR center you go, you have to study Europe. The basic point is Europe and the rest. You know, uh, whenever we study international order, also we think about Europe first and how Europe is responding to the other developments. And that is the major point from which we start. It presents the advancement of Europe or West as an unique experience which has no parallel in history. The standalone nature of the European experience of progress in itself is, as I mentioned, is very erroneous because this the whole idea of European miracle or a great divergence that one fine morning Europe started moving fast and other continents, other civilizations cannot do that because of some inherent problems in that particular civilizations. So they were not able to move because in the discussion about, especially Asia and Middle East or West Asia, you can see that still that kind of debates are going on. The contribution of the rest of the world in the European miracle is not a concern of the discipline of IR. For example, the interconnectedness of medieval Europe with the Arab Islamic world carefully avoided in the IR debates. What happened in the late medieval period? Again, I am using the term late medieval, sorry for that. Late medieval period in Europe is basically a kind of contribution from the Arab Islamic world that actually put Europe to the, whatever they call, the stage of European miracle or great divergence. But it is not mentioned anywhere. Nowadays, people start talking about it, but the contribution of Arab Islamic civilization to the, forward movement of Europe is not at all mentioned. History, people are talking about it. Sociology, people are talking about it, but not in IR. IR, it is a standalone case. Still, Europe moved ahead, without having any support from anywhere. That is the general idea we used to get. The positive tradition and the normative tradition in IR are to a great extent Eurocentric, absolutely. The post-positivist trends in the discipline of IR, like constructivism, feminist and post-colonial trends, are to a great extent, they were able to get out of the Eurocentric notions, though they have been generated in the critical traditions in the European tradition. See, post-positivism and positivism, these are the two major trends generally people used to discuss within IR, post-positivist revolution and things like that. But post-positivist revolution, to a great extent, understood this problem. But the basic points, including post-colonial theory, it's basically coming from the post-structuralist understanding. So it is again European. It is not from any other side that it is coming. That kind of critique is developing. Non-Western IR traditions emphasize more on the critique of Eurocentrism. However, they project an exact opposite image of the mainstream IR. You have some indigenous traditions which talk about indigenous response towards this. But the problem here is that there is no a coherent sort of uh, theoretical critique is coming from that side. It is just a mirror image. So we also had this thing earlier. We had this notion of sovereignty during the time of Guptas, or this particular theory was there in ancient times. This is how we generally counter that. It is basically just the mirror image, opposite mirror image of what exactly Eurocentrism is projecting. It is another, no. Some people say that no. There is a tendency within African scholars to say that everything was there in Africa. So that people used to say that it's Afrocentrism. It is not, it is just the opposite of Eurocentrism. The need of the hour is a balanced golden middle path, which can give space to both Western and non-Western traditions in IR. So there comes the importance of global IR, global, Amrita Acharya and others. What they are pushing forth is basically that. They are not looking at from a totally opposed position of Eurocentrism. Whatever happened in Europe, that is also important as far as a discipline IR is concerned. Similarly, what happened in the rest of the world, that is also important. So from a neutral point, one can get into that so that we can correct what historic distortions have happened in the uh, discipline of IR. That is exactly the major concern of global IR people. I find that is a very good answer to what exactly we are facing within this discipline, international relations. The Eurocentrism the severe, serious crisis which we are facing in this particular discipline. Thank you. We can have some some questions. Okay. Yes. Yeah, no, it's okay. It's better. Ah,
PhD scholar at Aligarh Muslim University, Department of Political Science. My question is not just related to the IIA, but social science in general. So, the culmination of this 5-day course is that there is a need to delink or unsubscribe to the ideas of Eurocentrism or the Western epistemologies. But there are certain variables at play. We see that there is something called, which Orion Noda calls as Western straitjacket, where scholars like us from the third world countries are not able to publish our our papers into Western journals. There is something, the issue of funding, there is the issue of ecosystem, the research ecosystem is not there. Another thing, that even professors like Acharya has to align and associate himself with American academia in order to be loud enough to uh, for the world to hear him. So, in such variables at work, how do we unlink or unsubscribe to these Eurocentric notions, and also not just unsubscribing in the sense that we unsubscribe from the Eurocentric notion and subscribe to, say, for example, you called it Afrocentrism or Indocentrism or Sinocentrism, unsubscribing or delinking in a real and a practical way. That's my question.
so that's a very valid question because so the ecosystem is such that even if you write about these things, who will publish it? That's a very valid question. That the post-colonial scholars, they also interestingly got that kind of audience outside India. They never got such kind of audience inside. Imagine if uh, Ranajit Guha or Partha Chatterjee and others, had they been not able to publish their stuff from the so-called Western publications, they would not have been heard. This is a contradiction, actually. Though we say all these things, that Eurocentrism is bad, it is to be opposed, we have to delink from that and all that. But in order to get our voice heard, we had to actually find out a via media. As of now, Indian journals, I think, don't reach, they don't have that kind of reach. You need to, again, within the discipline, you need to get into such journals which has got that kind of reach. Yes, definitely there. This is a very serious problem. I can also say this from the podium. It's easy to say that we must delink everything from that, but application. How do you? Our voice is going to, to be listened by others. This is a very serious issue. That's a contradiction. I know that. I'm knowing that well, but this is the only way out. You have to say that. Try to get it published as much as possible. Even within. I don't know, even if you write in these lines, how many journals in standard journals in India will publish your article? Because they are also looking for some recognition outside. We still, that is again the problem of Eurocentrism. You want to be recognized by them only. That situation is there. That's a contradiction. I understand that. Yes. Yes.
My name is Sir, I want to ask connected. Sir, I am Ahmed, and I want to ask a connected question. Sir, don't you think that Orient voices or whatever such ideas such as post-colonialism and global world order, don't you think that Orient voices have to come forward to promote these ideas? Because sir, as I talked yesterday also, the sir, most of the faculty or the people or the scholars, they are Western trained. We find paucity of Orient scholars coming in this field and talking about it. That is one part, sir. And as you were highlighting, many of the issues, such as sovereignty and security, are European construct. So, sir, nation or nationalism similarly is a European construct, in my view. And, sir, what can be other means? I don't find nationalism
too bad or bad, but what can be the other forms in which nationalism could take? Because nationalism has not been predominant. It has been since last 300 or 400 years, as you pointed out, since the Treaty of Westphalia. So, what could be other forms coming up? Thank you.
See, other forms is that, some people who post-national state, when they talk about, that also empires are in their mind. The structure of it, not the power structure, the structure of the empire, Roman Empire, because it included many people, people from different ethnicities were there. Ottoman Empire, uh, people from many ethnicities, many religions, they existed in a cosmopolitan fashion. People used to give the example of Constantinople, Istanbul as the very good example of multicultural city. How that was possible? If imagine the idea of nation is there, do you think a city like Istanbul would have developed? I don't think a city like Istanbul would not have developed provided nation and nationalism. These ideas were very strong at that point of time. That time, those ideas, even when the whole idea of nation was invented in Europe, that was not there in Ottoman Empire. That is why these cities, especially Istanbul, could survive as a cosmopolitan city. So cosmopolitanism should be the answer to this. But then, what kind of political form, in the sense of organizational form, it would take? Then we can only think about the form of empire without the kind of power relations. That is, I think, it's a very serious question. Somebody has to this post-national state debates. He's basically talking about that, but who nobody see the problem with words. The moment you talk about empire, everything associated with empire will come in that. So you have to say that no, this is for example, fundamentalism. What is wrong in fundamentalism? Fundamentalism, one who goes into the fundamentals of a particular thing. But it has got, there is in Sanskrit grammar, there is a principle called rudi. There is an attributed meaning to a word which you cannot change. The attributed meaning is happening over a period of time. You will not be able to change the meaning of the a particular time, even though what you're saying is correct. So this problem is there with this particular word also. That is it. With regard to your for the first part of the how many people are trained in our country to talk about this, which is post-colonial thinkers. They are all trained outside. Have you read some of the post-colonial writers, their original writings? It's very difficult to understand. It is very difficult to understand. It is very jargonized, though they are saying many things, very jargonized. A normal person trained in our own society will be finding it very difficult to, I am trained in a proper, what do you call, uh, vernacular language stream. I found it very difficult to understand. This whatever I speak in terms of English also is a struggle for me. For example, whatever I think, I have to translate it and then get it across. It's very difficult. People from unless and until you change this pattern of education, how do you make that change? Again, another thing, there are many regional languages. I don't know whether we can call it regional languages or not. Languages. They're also having a lot of knowledge about these things. That when you try to quote them, nobody will think these people are some people to be quoted. This is the problem. So you are compelled to quote people who have made their names in the English language or European language circles, plus some translations which are generally accepted all over. Otherwise, if you quote from for example, somebody quotes from Urdu, some Urdu text or Persian text, do you think that will be respected outside? No, that is the situation. So these things have to be, it is easy to say that we must confront Eurocentrism, but these things we have to take into consideration. We must, raise these issues. Unless and until this happens, you cannot confront Eurocentrism. The very same logic you are using to bring down your own people. That is the situation. Yes, yes. Because, she is okay.
So, sir, my name is Neha. My name is Neha. So my question is with the regard with diplomacy and balance of power. As you said, the institution of diplomacy and balance of power came in the context of Europe. So since I'm working on digital diplomacy, so my question is with regard to that. So global South tries to counter this narrative that Eurocentrism so basically Eurocentrism has have started all the global norms and institutions, and it is always these institutions were initiated by them. So my question is ki, in the age of technology and social media, so Western nation were the early adopters of digital platforms, and the countries like India, China, or South Africa, we have started using it around early 2010. So the question is, does this digital gap reinforce the Eurocentric dominance by suggesting that even in the realm of digital diplomacy, institutional norms are still initiated by the West?
Definitely. Is there any doubt about it? Norms with regard to, you know, social media issues and organizations, everything starts from there. We are just consumers only. In your question also, you used many terms which are Eurocentric, Global South. Why Global South? Whenever we say, well, in order to mention ourselves, we are saying the Global South. But Global South has a specific meaning attributed to that. We are not able to break that. The point is that all these things, the domination is still there. Though people would say that Europe lost its, strategic value and things like that. No, it has got that strategic value in, maybe in terms of, uh, military power, they may not be having that kind of capacity. But all other aspects, they are much ahead of many others. So in these new fields, definitely they are the early birds. They are moving fast. So we are actually galloping behind. So definitely we have to follow them unless and until we take this position of criticizing Eurocentrism and things like that, critiquing them. We will be always dominated by them. In digital diplomacy, especially in cyber world, all norms are actually created by them. We are just following it. We don't have a proper cyber laws. Also, we don't have. We are trying to model cyber laws from European countries. So that is the situation. Yes.
Good morning, sir. My name is Muhammad Hassan. Sir, as you said that for security of Europe and America, they want some kind of third world country. So people don't mind it. But we know that with the invasion of many countries, like you talk about Afghanistan and many Middle Eastern countries, by the invasion of America, the migration more active than earlier. So provide the
See, their imagination is that if you introduce some kind of economic change or some kind of development, quote unquote, that will resolve this problem of migration. Take the case of Afghanistan, the 20-year period from 2001 to 2021. They were basically trying to do that. It never succeeded. That's a different story altogether. But during that period, you could see nowadays the Afghan resistance group. There are many women where, even in Twitter also you can see they are very active. These women got education during that period. So that 20-year period, the civil society was active, donor agencies were there, NGOs were there. They were trying to create a situation whereby Afghans will remain in Afghanistan. Afghans will not move to other countries as, warriors or anything like that. But that never succeeded. This is the strategy they are pursuing everywhere. So even after decolonization, all these independent countries, they were all trying to give, food supply, food grant, PL 480. We know that wheat we used to get in the initial days. These are all for that purpose only. So if development is happening in third world or global south, as she used, uh, that migration, the migration is a security problem there. Right now, what we are seeing in Europe is that. They pursue it as a security issue. That would not happen. One. Second thing is sustainable development. What is sustainable development? In development discourse, this is also very important. What is sustainable development? They want to sustain the forests here. They have all domesticated their forests. You in YouTube, you can see if you see European forests or like parks only. They are not proper forests. They are domesticated because of commercial forestry and things like that. They have domesticated their forests. So they are not performing the role of forest there. Only tropical forests can do that. So for their clean air, we need to, all these forests have to be, protected properly. They are ready to give money to us. That is sustainable development. You should not trouble us. We'll give you money. They created all the problems during the 400 years of colonialism. That is forgotten. By giving money, they think that that will be forgotten. Cannot be. But the point is that their idea, development, is for that only. The idea of development is basically revolving around that. If development is there in these areas, migration will be lesser and that will ensure our security. They want people as workers there. They don't want as normal thinking human beings. That's all simple. Yes.
I am Aksa, master student of political science. My question is divided into some parts. The first is like we are analyzing our history, and from from the very beginning, the notion is Eurocentric, right? But can we say that world is moving ahead towards xenocentrism or other central notions? But when we see the notion of security, it is right now very Eurocentric. When we are seeing the problem of Gaza and Israel and any other conflict between the countries, it is dealt with Eurocentric notion. When we say that there will be any alternative, or if not Eurocentrism, then what?
See, Eurocentrism is being criticized. But when we subscribe to the idea of security and, the theories and notions around security, we are unknowingly again subscribing to the idea of Eurocentrism. Uh, Israel Gaza situation also is a classic example of that. Israel's security is important, quote unquote. How Israel came into being, that is not discussed in the whole process. The history of that country, how it emerged, it developed, it is staying there, is nobody's concerned. The problem with our discipline is of presentism. We only think about present, contemporary times. We don't go into the past, not even 70 years or 80 years or 100 years. If you think about those 100 years, then you can make a different kind of judgment about the problem. That is not happening. So one has to clearly oppose, critique Eurocentrism. At the same time, we have to be alert that we should not fall into the trap of Eurocentrism through other means. Like the classic example is security debates and discussions. Okay. Yes.
Uh, Good morning, sir. My name is Zubia Naushad. I am from Department of Political Science. Uh, uh, my question is, could you please elaborate on any significant non-Eurocentric IR theories or frameworks from the global south that are emerging?
See, the post-positivist theories, generally even feminist, view of IR and post-colonial uh, point of view with regard to IR constructivism. These are all basically trying to criticize this problem. But the problem is that their basic assumptions actually coming from Eurocentric notions. Post-structuralism is the base of post-colonialism. Is very tightly connected. These organically connected. So when you take a position against this particular issue, emanating from the same thing, emanating from that same space, how far you can go, that is the problem. The other option is global IR, Amitabh Acharya and others, they are pushing for. There, I think you can see, there also you will see a lot of, crisscrossing happening. So nobody can say at this point that there is a pure non-Western viewpoint towards, looking at this particular discipline or IR in that sense. There are national Indian IR, South Asian IR. These kind of IR formations are there. I don't think on national basis, how can you imagine about IR theory? I still have my doubts. Even regional basis, South Asian, there is a group of people talking about South Asian IR, Chinese IR like that. Yes, you can take many insights from ancient texts in China or Indian texts like Kautilya, Satyashastra, and all other medieval texts also. There are many texts. But then the moment you talk about Indian IR, South Asian IR, Chinese IR, that creates a problem in my mind. Till now, I don't think there is no foolproof method to counter the existing dominant trend. Only, but what is important is critiquing whether you are looking for a particular kind of alternative or not. Alternative may appear after some time, but critiquing should be there. That is important.
So
Yes.
my question, in contact with Mr. Hassan question, like, if I'm not wrong, you were trying to link, or you have linked the development of the third world with the migration problem. There, you want to basically stop it. But if we go through the history of America, so America is a country built up by the immigrants. So if there is only there are countries which are highly benefited by the migration, they are the European countries because they attract the best mind across the universe. My question is that if we are going to link the development just to check the migration from the third world countries to Europe or to America, then what is about basically Francis Poema argument of isothemia, magnothemia, thymos of the Muslim world or Islamic world? So, are we need to look on the development in these countries from that lens, which was given by Francis Fukuyama, or we are need to look this problem with this perspective of the security or challenge?
See, you are right. They want best minds. But this development is not targeting West minds. They want a section of people, but they don't want everybody. The situation right now is the other way around. People are reaching in large numbers, almost like reverse, what you call colonialism or whatever. The way they have. So that they don't want. Why Trump is coming out with a lot of restrictions? Because they think that no, this group will come and dominate. Europe, but America, that much is not there. But in Europe, this is very much there, especially in France and other places. This unbridled, what you call, kind of migration is a problem for them. So that is why they are stressing more into development. With regard to United States, they exterminated the entire population. It's migration, but then by two ways. One is forceful extermination, or by biological. The kind of they were not able to survive because of that. So that is a clear case of extermination. This happened with New Zealand as well as Australia also. But that is a different case, and this is what is right now it is happening. That kind of situation is not happening. So they don't want yes, yeah, particular set of people, troublemakers, quote unquote. They don't want them. So they think the developmental activities may keep them in these areas. But the best minds, if they come, they don't hesitate to accept them. That is what I.
Example of this during these 20 years, other persons who got educated during these 20 years, they are now playing a very active role.
In the resistance movement, not in.
My point is that American objective was not just to develop Afghanistan because they were bound by the Treaty of Westphalia to reconstruct Afghanistan, and which has been highlighted by Francis Fukuyama in his book State Building. The American efforts failed in the Middle East, specifically post 1991 development in Iraq as well as in Afghanistan. They failed miserably, but they were very, very much successful in Germany, Japan after the Second World War. So basically, they were duty bound to reconstruct the Afghanistan which was destroyed after the war, after their invasion. They were not doing this development to check the migration of
No, it's not that. It's not that. My point is that their approach is like that. Their approach is like that. If third world is developed, you can to an extent counter this sort of migration to the first world. That is the whole idea.
Uh,
very difficult to buy. But,
so may I ask? So they're from Political Science Department, AMA. Um, so when we talk about the hegemony or the control of the West over the rest, so it's not only through force, right? There was certain kind of functionality in their values. That is also one of the reasons that we accept it. So we found Raja Ram Mohan Roy fighting against the social evils using the same rationality. So there was some rational element. At the same time, there were certain values that were very attracted for human nature. So liberalism, yeah, capitalism, I may criticize for its oppressive nature, but when I enter in the air-conditioned mall, I really enjoy it. So there are certain problems in the human nature as well because they were very attractive. We basically adopted or observed those things. So I am trying to ask, when we are talking about Western hegemony or oppression, are we only criticizing the West, or we are also self-introspecting our own self in the process of colonization theory or global idea?
Actually, that should have been the ideal position. What you are saying is the ideal position, that when you criticize, you should look at yourself also. But generally, that never happens. What is happening? What is happening is the other way around. You bombard them with criticism. You are not looking inside. What you are practicing, again, rationality. You raised a very important point. Rationality, by your statement, it means that rationality is a prerogative of the West. We got rationality from, that is the meaning. I don't know whether that is correct or not. For example, about meaning, Derrida says, author is dead, reader is alive. Once the writer is written his word, he is not important. The meaning will be made by the reader. The same thing has been said earlier by a person called a Rajashekara in Indian Sanskrit, tradition. So, the moment you say that no, Rajashekara predates Derrida, people may, laugh at you. That is the right now the situation. But which is true. There are many things that rationality, if you say that rationality is completely with West, then you are basically negating the possibility of rational tradition in other knowledge cultures also. I think that is not correct. To my mind, no, we also had national rational element. We also have, in our tradition, whichever tradition you take, we also have, no tradition is able to survive without rationality. Rationality and irrationality, they coexist in that sense. Rational traditions are there here also, but or Chinese civilization, or for example, classic example is Islamic civilization. If you say that no, only Europe has rationality, then what is the meaning of that? So my point is that part we got attracted. We thought that is much better than our kind of rationality. But to my mind, that is a notion which we should seriously critique. We also look into rational traditions in our own tradition. That is very important.
Yes. So basically, why this kind of question pops up when, say, rationality is adhered to the West, um, and that is related to the question. Uh, Non-Western IR theory had a very less life, right? 2007 to 2014, when Acharya is just transforming it. Um I think the mirror image was very important. Uh, Mirror knowledge was very important because the kind of eraser of knowledge we have seen through colonial expeditions and those disciplines which were colonial disciplines, not only IR but also anthropology to some extent and many more other disciplines. Even now people are saying natural sciences had also very much.
Mathematics.
Yeah, mathematics and so on and so forth. So I think non-Western IR theory would have at least survived for a bit, say 50 years, 60 years, to create certain sense of, say, liberating conceptual categories which were local to counter the Western hegemonic, say, episteme. And that would have given certain kind of confidence to come up and then say that now we create a middle path or something, because the eraser was such that now whenever we talk of anything, say rationality or nyaya, the nyaya in our tradition would always be starting with Plato's justice, but will not actually go to our own local tradition, or for that matter, say 1970s hijama concept in African tradition or Ubuntu tradition and many more, right? I think this this entire disjuncture of emergence of global IR is doing. I mean, I'm suspicious. I mean, you may counter it. It's doing disservice to the post-colonial overhauling of discipline, which happened in other social sciences, but in IR, only within 7 years you realize that we have to just take a somersault jump. But why that is happening, right?
You're right. You're right. It's the devil is in details, actually. So, my point is that yes, non-Western IR. Non-Western IR again. The issue was that it start splitting into Indian IR, South Asian IR, Chinese IR. That created one problem. So, how do you confront the so-called global, not the Amitabh Bachchan kind of global IR I'm talking about, global mainstream IR, just with Indian IR, South Asian IR, Chinese IR? It won't be possible, to my mind. On the other hand, there should have been a kind of synthesis from other sources, and then we should have developed. But in that kind of intellectual cooperation has not happened among scholars. That is one problem. Then this group must have decided that how do you counter a global mainstream IR? For that you need to talk about a global thing. Otherwise, the moment you talk about Indian IR, South Asian IR, Chinese IR, it is easy for them to categorize or castigate it as ethnocentric sort of reaction. For example, Carnatic music is a well-developed thing. Hindustani music are also a very well-developed kind of music. But for Western imagination, it is ethno music. Music means Mozart, Beethoven, Bach. Western music. So that is the problem. That problem these people must have. Basically, we are all in India. We don't on a daily basis confront this problem. But these scholars are right now in the citadels of academic power. They are seeing this issue. So they're confronting them. So they may be sidelined within the they are dealing with Indian IR or Chinese IR. So that must have created this problem. So how to confront a global mainstream IR if you are not also using the term global? That may be the reason. But to my mind, again, the detail create the problem. So there may be elements of positive criticism from towards Eurocentrism in this line of thinking also. I'm not very familiar with that. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, sir. My name is Shavesh, sir. So thank you very much for your outlining your Eurocentrism. I'm pretty much impressed and convinced with all the points which you have made in the context of the Eurocentric area. But sir, the problem is, my question is related to that we often see that we use West and Eurocentric interchangeably. Though I believe that there should be a kind of dealing and demarcations between both of them, because most of the writings, if we allow, one of them is Giovanni Arrighi, written in the long 20th century, in which he wrote extensively chapter The Three Histories of Capitalism, in which he demarcated that how Pax Britannica converted into the Pax Americana, and obviously the American IR and European IR is very much different in terms of not only colonialism but also institutionalization of the international relations. So we should also demarcate and delink both of the international relation, I do believe, because whatever American IR or American political scientist, American IR theorists produce, it's incorporate into the boundary. Problem with us that when we put these ideas, when we question these ideas, all us or points have sideline on the ideological intersection, ideological debate. So somehow we are limited. So I want to answer both of these points.
You're right. You're right. In the sense that no, West also, again, the people of may be thinking very differently. East European history, East European imagination, so they may be thinking. But when the moment we talk about West, we put everything together. Europe, America is not there. Why? Imagination West means America. So my guess that distinction is the point is that this discipline, unlike that with history or anthropology for that matter, here trend is so dominant that institutions in these countries, though they are out, circle of West Eurocentric, Euro-American universe. Following that, the classic example, Indian institutions, Indian AR institutions, you see their syllabus, their topics, research. It's just, nobody is, capable or courageous enough to challenge by just taking one different research topic. That's oh, no, please don't take this. No, this may create problem. That is how it is happening. So unless and until that is happening, it is very difficult to do that. In history, in sociology, in political science, other disciplines, this issue is not there. Still, there are you'll find a lot of scholars, behind us. Almost already fought this battle, but we don't have that kind of people right now. Thank you.